Culture on the Apricot Tree, where we talk about gospel insights through great stories and help you find entertainment that is both true and beautiful. I'm your host, Liz Busby. I'm a writer of science fiction and fantasy and a reviewer of books and a Latter-day Saint. And with me today is Carl, who's officially now a co-host of the podcast. Yay!
Yay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carl Cranny. I have a PhD in religion, and I like to write on the intersection of religious ideas and themes in pop culture. And so I'm happy to be joining again and joining as an official co-host moving forward.
Yay. And with us also today again is Daniel, returning guest.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm a constitutional lawyer by profession, a big fan of pop culture, movies, show tunes, video games. Excited for the conversation today.
Awesome. And then we have Amanda. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Amanda Freebairn. I'm a wife and mom, and I'm a graduate student in education, and I write about religion.
Awesome. We're going to start with our best book segment. My best book of today is actually a book. It is a book called Beyond the Mapped Stars by Rosalind Eves, and it is a YA novel with an LDS protagonist from a mainstream publisher, which is really refreshing to see. You don't see a lot of mainstream books about LDS protagonists. This one is set in the late 1800s. She is the daughter of a second wife, and she wants to become an astronomer. And so the book is all about the tension between science and religion, and then also between family and career for women. And I really liked the resolution. It felt very faithful and very realistic to me as a woman who is interested in science and career and marriage. I liked how it worked out, and it felt very fair and just a beautiful book. So highly recommend this book to everyone. Carl, what have you got for us?
So I'm actually going to recommend one of the new Star Trek shows. It's the one on Nickelodeon. It's called Star Trek Prodigy, because I have a 5-year-old daughter, and we, a couple of weeks ago, decided, I was like, how am I going to get her into Star Trek? Because I want this to be a thing in her life. And they have this TV show for kids, and we have really enjoyed watching it together. Sometimes we have, like, Dad will watch a dad show, and the kids aren't allowed to watch it, and sometimes it's just kid shows, and Dad doesn't want to watch it. But this is one that we've been watching together, and we've had good discussions about it, and it's been quite a fun experience. So for those of you wondering how to get your kids into Star Trek, for the 4 of you out there who want that, Star Trek Prodigy is a great way to start.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yes, passing on the family legacy. I was introduced to Star Trek by watching Next Generation. We'd all pile into my parents' bedroom and watch it every week. So it's a family affair.
That is exactly, yes. Yep. That's what happened to me too.
Okay, Daniel, what have you got?
So I want to recommend a video game that I've been replaying. It's one of my favorites, Hollow Knight. It's an indie game. It's a Metroidvania game. That's the genre where you explore a world and battle enemies and find new upgrades and power-ups. But it's, I think, the best of its genre, which is really saying a lot, because it's, competing with great games like Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. But I think it's better even than those games. The art is amazing. It's this beautiful hand-drawn 2D style. The music is haunting. The enemies, the battle, the gameplay is just so engaging and so much fun. I love it, and replaying it has been really, really, really enjoyable. I don't usually replay games, but that one has just been such a joy to replay.
That's awesome. I'm always looking for good new video games for my kids, so I'm excited. Okay, and our final best book is from Amanda.
So I'm going to recommend a book that is not new or uncommon. I'm reading Anne of Green Gables to my 5-year-old, and it has been really, really fun. This is the first chapter book that I'm reading out loud to her. And it's been really fun to talk about some of the themes of friendship and gratitude. And it's just fun to see her kind of start to listen to and try to understand more complex stories. So it's something that I would definitely recommend for reading to your kids. It's been really fun.
Yeah, my that was a book that I read out loud with my kids last summer. Well, we listened to it while we were driving to summer camps and things during the summer. 13-year-old down to a 5-year-old. It worked out really great. They all enjoyed it. The book just holds up really well. So I definitely can second that recommendation.
Yeah. And I have a 5-year-old daughter. We've been trying to figure out what we should get her into as far as like longer stories, and so maybe we'll take you up on that.
It's kind of nice because Anne
Good
of
fun.
Green Gables is a little episodic, right? So there's like little
Yes.
stories.
Right?
There's the the story
Mm-hmm.
with the carrots, and there's the story with the slate, and just little bits, and so it's not as big of a narrative.
Audiobooks with kids is great. We listened to quite a few audiobooks last year. We listened to some of the Narnia books, for instance, with
Yeah.
my kids, and that was a lot of fun as well.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to our main discussion. Um, we are here to talk about Turning Red, which is the new Pixar film set in the Asian community of Toronto. Um, and we had some interesting reactions to this film. We've all been talking about it a bit. So we were excited to hop on and just get something recorded quick. Would anyone like to share their first reaction to this film?
So I'll go first. This morning I was walking my 5-year-old to kindergarten, and it's 3 blocks, and it's not a hard walk. And she's like, "Oh, I'm too tired. It's too cold. I just can't handle it." And I was kind of doing the Mormon parent thing where I said, "Your ancestors walked across the plains. Like you can handle the 3 blocks to the thing. You can do hard things, and doesn't even qualify as a hard thing." And then the question became whether we should watch this movie for family night before we recorded this podcast. And I was thinking about it, and I decided not to, and I'm really glad because kind of the lesson I was trying to impart to my daughter on the way to kindergarten is almost contradicted in several major ways by some of the themes of this movie. And I really had some parts that I had a viscerally negative reaction to. Even though it ends up okay, and I'm going to sort of nuance this reaction as we go through. But I am really glad we did not watch this for Family Home Evening, because I almost would have wanted to turn it off. And then I would have had to have longer discussion about, why did you turn that off, Dad? And I really disliked like 90% of this movie.
Yeah, we had a similar reaction at my house. We actually did watch it for family movie night on Friday. We had 2 kids who didn't want to watch it, and 2 kids who wanted to watch it. And I convinced them. I was like, "Oh, we can trust Pixar. We've always loved Pixar films. Every single one has been great." And yeah, this one was not great for us. There were definitely some parts that were good, but overall, it really didn't live up to my hopes for it.
My husband and I have been talking about how we need to start probably pre-screening movies before we show them to our kids. We've seen a few recently that have come out that kind of just little bits and pieces that have been red flags to us. Think, okay, we're going to need to start pre-screening. And this movie, so I don't think I disliked it as much as everybody else in this group. I would give it like a 6 out of 10. But that being said, I would not have shown it to kids my kids' age who are 5 and 2, and then we have a baby. I always assume with Pixar is generally the studio that does really well family movies as opposed to kid movies or tween movies. They really are good at hitting the whole family. And this one, not so much. And I would not recommend it to families with younger children.
Yeah, I agree with that, Amanda. For me, we were going to watch it with my 7-year-old and 5-year-old, and luckily I read some reviews about it in advance, and just was warned the content is not for small children at all. So my wife and I watched it. I didn't like it. I think there's some good parts about it. There's some, I think there's good humor. I think it's well done in parts, but I thought that the overall message was not something I was a fan of at all. And so I'm glad we didn't watch it with my kids. And we noticed with our kids that they tend to model behavior that they see in characters in movies. And so this movie, I'm really glad we didn't watch it, because just the kind of attitude of the kids in the movie, the way they respond to grown-ups, I think would be a bad example for modeling for my daughters. So I'm glad we didn't watch it for that reason. In addition to other aspects of the message of it, just the modeling, I think that would just have a negative impact on my
Yeah,
daughters.
I really wanted to like this movie because I love movies with Asian culture in them. I'm a big anime fan and enjoy lots of Japanese and Chinese books. So I was excited to like this. Like I'd heard a controversial review that was like, "Oh, this being set in an Asian community limits the audience for this movie," which I think is just crap. That doesn't make any sense. Like Encanto being set in Colombia and being very strong in the Colombian culture didn't limit the audience for Encanto. So I don't think that is what's limiting the audience in any way. It's like you said, the way that the family dynamics are portrayed and the subject matter. Um, which isn't to say that we can't have good films that are about puberty and about growing up. Like these are important topics that we do need to talk about. This just isn't the one, I think.
I thought it was an interesting contrast to me. There, I mean, you have like Inside Out as another Pixar movie that I think dealt with similar
Oh, for sure.
themes so well. I mean, the character in Inside Out is a couple years younger. I think 11 year old. I think in Inside Out, if I remember correctly. But the contrast to me was just very strong. Where Inside Out, I think, is this beautiful portrait of reconciling your identity and your family, and this I thought just didn't hit the mark on that at all
And I
for
think
me.
Inside Out does a good job of being very consistent with the rules of its fantasy world. Like the emotions and the system is very clear. One of the things that I was talking about it with my kids afterwards because I felt like we needed to do a debrief the next day about what they got out of this movie. Um, and one of the things they brought up that bothered them was that they said that in the movie that if you don't capture the panda spirit the first time there's a red moon, then you're stuck with it for the rest of your life. And yet, all of her family members, and the climax of the movie, break out their panda spirits, and then they're able to put them back. And I feel like the inconsistency in that made it kind of hard to buy into this fantasy concept. Um, and just the concept itself doesn't work well as a message of like you either have all the panda or you have none of the panda and there is nothing in the middle and you have to decide right now.
Hmm.
It's just not a good
Yeah.
scenario, I don't think.
It also doesn't make sense because I mean there's so many points in which like the panda has to do with like emotion and feelings of emotion, and then you control the panda by controlling your emotions, and yet the mom and the grandmother and the aunties, like they have plenty of kind of outrageous emotions, and there's no sort of connection as to what that has to do with the panda, if anything.
And the fact that the main character
Right.
is able to learn to
And I think
control her
that
panda within like a day or so.
I wish puberty
She's just
worked
like,
that
oh no,
way.
the emotions, like, yeah. The very first time she just walks around, she's talking like a robot. Like, oh yes, that sounds like lots of fun. So it doesn't come out. And then as soon as they decide to embrace it, she's like, I can poof panda, I can poof not panda, and that seemed wildly inconsistent to me.
there's also, I think that her dad talks about the mom that one time she let the panda out, and that was when they were dating or courting, and the parents were against it. And that, assuming they were older than 13 when they were dating or courting, so again, it's inconsistent. It must have been sometime after she'd done the ritual to constrain the panda, and yet she's able to, the emotions come out, and she becomes this giant panda monster in the at one point. So
Yeah.
it just seems
Yeah, and there's
inconsistent. I
definitely
agree.
it's not quite clear. I think part of the problem is that maybe the filmmakers weren't clear on what the panda was supposed to symbolize, right? Because there's
Yes.
early this tie where the panda is first triggered after she has these kind of sexual feelings towards this boy and she's fantasizing about him, and then the next day the panda comes. And so there's kind of this tie to puberty, but then there's tied to emotions in general, or to embracing yourself, or is it to her heritage? Like it's not clear. It's kind of a muddy symbol, and because it's different things at different times, it doesn't work very well, like Inside Out did, where it was they spent a lot of time being very clear. These five emotions are the ones that we need.
Right.
Hmm.
If you go and watch the sort of making of thing that's also up on Disney Plus called Embrace the Panda. When they interview all the different people, they are also not entirely consistent on what the panda means. And so, on that sense, and I know I said this about one of the other when we did a podcast on another show a couple podcasts ago. Like, I felt like this could have used another rewrite, or like another editor going through and being like, okay, like what exactly is going on here? Because that felt like it needed a little more time to bake in the oven.
Which is so unusual with Pixar because story is their thing, and they spend
Right?
years and years and years and years and years on these stories, typically. And so the stories are what's really kind of solid and definitely what makes them stand apart from other kind of just
Right.
kid movie studios, as opposed to family movie studios.
Yeah, like Pixar movies last.
Yeah, Pixar is, I mean, famous.
Yeah.
A story, like one of the stories that from Pixar that I've heard told a couple times is when they were making the Toy Story movie, for instance, the first Toy Story. Woody's character was portrayed as a jerk and not very nice, and they watched it and they said, no, this is not working. Like, we're gonna take it back to the beginning, reboot it with a real core understanding of the character and the concept, and that's always been their hallmark. I think what's made their movie so great. So I agree. I would think that this just didn't have that extra level of really understanding the characters and really having to be empathetic and relatable. And to me, at least from the grown-ups, the mom in particular, just was missing some degree of empathy that
I think
wish
the
was
mom was definitely the most underdeveloped character in this movie, especially when you compare to Encanto, which just came out. So there's the comparison to be made there, where you see Abuela is a much more well-rounded figure. You can understand why she's doing the things she's doing, and the mom in this movie just feels really arbitrary, doing things that no rational person would do, like confronting the store clerk after finding one drawing and not letting her daughter talk about it. It doesn't make it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a real person in the way that Abuela did feel like a real person and a real grandma.
Which is so funny to me, because this one of the things they talk about in the Embrace the Panda is that this is the first Pixar movie that was completely helmed by at all the top levels by women. And I just found that so interesting that one of them is like, "Oh, I think her mother's a really well-rounded character." And I was like, "Did you watch the movie? I didn't feel like that was true at all."
Well, I think this sort of touches to like the first reason why I think this is not appropriate for young kids. And that is because as a mom, my oldest is 5. I'm still totally figuring stuff out. There are some things that are always going to be boundaries for me. You know, uh chastity and like real important morals and values in our family. There are other things that I might, I might think, 14 is a great age for a cell phone, and that might change down the road. And maybe there are some things that I am going to be a little bit too intense and need to back off on. But a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old watching this movie isn't going to be able to see this mom and think, oh, she's a complicated character who loves her daughter, who maybe is a little overprotective, and she's trying to figure out this balance as her oldest child moves on to adolescence. They look at it, as my 5-year-old daughter said, and said, May's mom is mean. She didn't let her go to the concert. She didn't let her go to the birthday party. She's a mean mom. And I think that, the first important point is I don't think that even if I think that some of these points are important for discussion, with adolescents, moms and adolescent girls, it's not something that young children, boys or girls, have the ability to understand yet.
For sure. Yeah, you can definitely see that the mother is an imperfect parent, right? And that she does learn somewhat that, like, earlier in the movie, she's blaming all of May's actions on her friends or this boy at the convenience store. And none of it is May's fault because she's obviously perfect and just a child and not capable of making choices. So we do see that move on of the daughter needs to be held accountable for her own actions, and the parent, her mom, should be talking to her about, why this choice is a bad choice, and not just assuming you're being influenced by bad friends, I'm going to cut off these friends. and then you'll be fine again.
Mm-hmm.
But I think because the mom is so extreme in how she acts, it makes it so that the message of the movie is you should rebel against your parents, do what you want, and you are right to push back against your family and your traditions. So I think if it was a more nuanced portrait, it would be a different message and a better message, where there could be some truth to what the parent is saying. The parent keeps the child safe. Going with a bunch of 13-year-olds to a giant concert by yourself is not always the safest thing. Parents keep kids safe, but they can also overcorrect and overprotect. And I think if the portrayal was more nuanced, the movie could have been more nuanced and more appropriate. But I think because the mom was so over the top, it meant that the daughter's had to be right ultimately. Had to be
there was
proven
no
right through the
distinction
story.
between the not letting her go to the concert, which is completely reasonable, and her like confronting the store clerk, which was completely unreasonable, especially to a young child watching that. It's like they're just two examples of the mom being crazy.
For sure. And I think if you compare it to a movie like, I was thinking of Brave too, where you've got very overbearing mother, has a specific vision of who her daughter should be and how she should be. And in the end, the daughter realizes the mother has good motivations behind these things. And we find a middle ground and a way to both come together instead of the mother needs to give up everything and support the daughter no matter what her choices are at 13.
And you see the exact same thing in Encanto too, with Abuela Alma and really all of her children and grandchildren, where they realize that Abuela isn't just being a nutty grandma, that she is trying to protect and care for her family and her community, but probably needs to make some adjustments in her expectations.
And this is the thing that I most, I think, disliked about the movie, is that because the mother is such a weirdly one-dimensional character, which is so out of place for Pixar. And I also would like to state that, like, none of us are Asian, are first-generation Asian Canadian immigrants, right? Like, I understand that this is a thing in their community, and there seem to be lots of conversations about that, and there will be as long as there are immigrants to different cultures and things like that. This is not a new problem, but because she's so one-dimensional,
Yeah.
the theme of the movie that if you have an overbearing parent, I think it is reasonable to rebel against them a little bit. And she was overbearing, but because there's no nuance to it at all, the basic thesis of the movie is the only way to have a good relationship with your parent is to rebel and rebel and rebel until they come around, and then you can have a healthy relationship with them. Because at the end of the movie, they do have a healthy relationship. She's still serving in the temple. Mei Mei's still serving in the temple. She gets to hang out with her friends and go do karaoke, but she's going to be home in time for dinner. The mother kind of respects her, but still has some expectations. Like, there's still some parenting going on. Like the last 5 minutes of the movie is actually really good. I thought they balanced everything really well, which was so weird because the previous 95% of the movie was very unbalanced.
Well, I did notice something. A friend pointed this out when we were having a conversation about this in a Slack Discord group, that the dialogue in the last scene is
in the Panda
terrible.
scene, right,
It's
where they're all putting their
worst
pandas away.
monologues at the end of the movie. Yeah, well, in the Panda scene and afterwards, I think she's talking about this this messy part of ourselves that we have to let out, and we just have to be not repressed. And the line, my Panda,
gosh.
my choice line that the dialogue is terrible, like really, really bad at the end of the movie. But the actual what's being shown on screen is not bad. Like you said, that they're serving together. There's a healthy relationship with the friends. They're invited to dinner. That's a lot better. But what they say is just awful. What they do, I think, is fine.
Yeah, and again, the dialogue in the scene with her mom, where her mom chooses to be separate from the panda and she doesn't. She says, "Don't hold back for anyone. The further you go, the prouder I'll be." So it's like, don't consider anyone else. Don't consider how you affect other people. Do whatever your little 13-year-old heart tells you is best, and don't listen to me. Like that is a very weird resolution for that mother, and it doesn't feel very earned. Like we don't see the mother
No,
gradually
certainly
changing
not.
towards that. We just all of a sudden, we've calmed the mother down from being a giant kaiju panda, which is awesome. Like truly a fun climax to the movie. It's probably my kid's favorite part. But
Mhm.
there's no emotional change, and then all of a sudden she's like, I'm gonna let my daughter do whatever she wants. The end. And now we have a good relationship. Yeah. Very weird.
Yeah.
And I did also dislike that because and the dad is also such a non-character
Mm-hmm.
until at one point he's like, I don't know, I like this video you made. It made me laugh. You should completely continue rebelling against your mom, and I'm not going to stand up to her. There's no conversation between the mom and the dad about what good parenting styles might entail doing in this situation. It just, this family is deeply dysfunctional, and it is dysfunctional in such one-dimensional ways that it ruins what could have been a really interesting and nuanced movie.
Yeah.
Even the relationship with the friends, as you pointed out, Liz, the mother just doesn't assume that her daughter has any kind of agency, and the friends are all also completely affirming of all of Mei choices, no matter what.
Right.
And
Right.
that's not right either.
Yeah, and I did actually like the friends as identity, like themselves. Um, because a lot of times when you have a group of girlfriends in a movie, they will all be very stereotypical. Like this one is the smart one, this one's the athletic one, this one is the sporty one, and this one is the girly one. And that's not how women are. That's not how people are. We're not one-dimensional identities based on what we like. So I enjoyed the fact that this movie had 4 girls, and they're just girls. They're not specifically one type of girl or have one specific interest other than boy bands. But they felt real, more real than some of the other characters to me.
They were also very authentically awkward, which I appreciated.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, and I did enjoy like the
when they were
various
interacting with
body
each other
types
and with
too.
the world around them. Yes.
Yeah, they were diverse background wise, diverse personality wise. I thought it was a good group.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
agree with that.
One thing I
And it's
didn't like
interesting.
about the friend group was this movie is trying to be more positive about female puberty and sexuality, but they take it to mean if we're going to be positive about embracing sexuality and attraction, that means that girls should sit around and comment on boys' bodies the way that boys do about girls' bodies. And that just seemed really weird, where they're sitting and watching the boys play sports and being like, oh, that guy has delts for days, and like, oh, look at his legs. And it's like, if any movie showed a crowd of boys watching girls play basketball and make those kind of comments, like that would be obviously wrong. And I don't think it is better in that we're doing it with girls. It's still not right to objectify people.
And I thought just overall the sexualization was a lot in the movie. It reminded me of, did anyone see the movie
Mm.
Cuties? There was a big
I've heard about
I
it.
controversy
did not.
over on Netflix. I don't know if anyone else had seen it. So also 11-year-old girl in the movie. The movie's about her and her group of friends that rebel, getting into dancing, kind of a very like a hip hop dance that's very like sexual and thrusting and gyrating. Very similar movies actually, which is interesting commentary. I mean, except I thought that Cuties at least was intended to be a social commentary critiquing the culture of social media kind of obsession from teenagers, whereas this movie was in some ways less critical of that, and it didn't really criticize at all the sexualization. And I thought that made me very uncomfortable, the way that this movie didn't seem to have a problem with young teenage girls being sexualized and objectified in this
And it
way.
just
So
seemed
The
weird,
moment of
I think,
climax
because there
where
is
she
no
knocks.
romantic interest, right? There's no specific, I mean, there is the store clerk, but like she never talks to him. She has no idea who he is.
Right.
It would have been less weird if there was a specific boy she was interested in and it wasn't just because of his body. It was like, oh, I like him because this, and we talk about this, or we have class together, like some kind of humanizing factor instead of sexuality is lust. And that's not a good message.
Right.
That was a message I felt really awkward having my kids watch.
And to maybe tie it into the cuties analogy a little bit, which the reason, of course, that movie there was such a hullabaloo about it was because of the posters for the movie, which made it look like it was just about a bunch of girls being very sexually provocative all the time, which is not what the movie ended up being about. If you actually bother to watch it and listen to the director, who is also like a first generation immigrant from, I think, Senegal into Paris, and
Right.
so a lot of the same sorts of things. But the climax of Turning Red is literally Mei Mei twerking at her mom. And there's no discussion from there's no indication from any part of the movie, any of the grandma, the aunts, the dad, the friends, the mom, the K-pop group or the boy band group. None of them look at that and go, maybe 13-year-old girls shouldn't be twerking, but it's like the absolute climax of her rebellion against her mom, which is completely embraced by this movie. And we've come a long way since Cuties, and apparently we flipped the script, and that is not to our society's credit, and not to Pixar's credit either.
But and in Cuties, actually, at the end, I mean, the girl, the daughter, the girl there also starts lying and stealing and cheating and doing bad things. But at the end, that's not rewarded. She loses her friend group because she's lying and doing bad things. She alienates herself from her mom a little bit, and then they're eventually reconciled. And there's kind of a meeting in the middle, a little more there. So I thought that was actually just a better movie about, despite the controversy, and I wouldn't recommend it necessarily, but it had the same story, but actually did the things that I think this movie could have done
and it's
better
also not
than
for
this movie did, which I
children
think is
who can't understand
no.
really complicated messages. Where is this is this prescription, or is this just depiction of real life, and then critique of that depiction?
No, they're not selling stuffed animals from
Right.
Cuties at
The
Target.
panda
Yeah.
is
I
so
think
cute. Like, that is definitely one thing this movie has going for it, is like the cute
it's
pandas.
cute.
I like Pixar embracing the anime eye expressions. Like, that really added to the movie in terms of visual style. But yeah, it's unfortunate the message is not good to go
I
with
agree.
the attractive visual style.
And there's one other thing I'd like to say really quick about the overall message is I'm sure at least several of you here, and I'll explain this test for the audience, for those who might not know it. I feel like this movie, I'd have to go watch it again just to make sure, but I feel like it fails the anti-Bechdel test. Right? So the Bechdel test, for those of you who don't know, is sort of a feminist critique of cinema, where it says you fail the test if you don't have two named women in the movie who talk to each other about something other than a man. Like if you do have two women who both have names, who are like major characters, and talk to each other about something other than a man, you've passed the test. And I feel like there are not two named male characters in this movie who never speak to each other about something other than a woman or a girl. And
Yeah.
it's
definitely a female-oriented movie for sure.
Yeah. I think that the members of the boy band have names,
but they don't
they're
talk
named
to the
characters.
dad,
They don't
or
talk
right?
other than
Anyway,
Yeah.
no, agreed.
yeah,
It's
anyone else,
definitely
yeah.
true. I
agree.
and I think there is room for a movie like this, because there are so many movies that don't pass the Bechdel test. So I'm not like super concerned that it doesn't have that many named male characters, because it is about the relationship between the grandma, the mom, and May, and then May and her friends. So, but yeah, it is a little weird, having. But maybe it's part of the culture too, like having her father be really passive and not really part of this discussion. And also because it's a thing that's passed down from mother to daughter. So it's kind of between them, and the dad isn't as involved in the conversation, maybe. I don't know.
Right. I agree. I think that, um, it's I don't necessarily have an issue with it very obviously being um uh it's a movie for teenage or for tween girls and their moms. However, again, it goes back to that has not been Pixar's typical direction that they've gone. In fact, I can't think of any other movies that they have made that have been so clearly not like you can sit down with your whole family and watch this movies. And so that's, I think, what makes it especially jarring when you sit down for family movie night, expecting that like this is going to be a family movie, and it's not just, not appropriate for young children, but it's also just like not going to be interesting, or not going to connect with boys and young men and dads too. So
Yeah, I think my husband's first comment when we finished the movie, he says, "I don't think we were in the target audience for that one." And my boys were definitely like, there were not enough battle scenes. And I was like, well, I guess we know your movie preferences for sure. But even
There was
then,
a giant kaiju panda. That's not nothing.
I know I pointed that out. But again, as we said, like the main battle in that is chanting and twerking. So not enough for my action loving boys apparently. Yeah.
mhm.
But even compared to something like we watched Ron's Gone Wrong recently, and that's it's a movie about kids in school. So there's not, superhero battles or anything, but they felt like that had a lot more of the action they wanted. This is a different kind of movie that's more about relationships than action happening.
One thing that I think was interesting that it meant, Liz, you might have mentioned when we were discussing this beforehand, it was the
Yeah.
topic of religion in the movie, and also the religious ritual of the kind of exorcism ritual. I thought was really interesting, as well. My wife commented that this is, I guess, about the exorcism ritual, and the themes was, she thought there was the message was also a metaphor for LGBT issues as well. It could have been a conversion therapy, a conversion, kind of exercise a part of yourself type a metaphor as well. And so that was an interesting potential real world parallel that maybe the filmmakers might have been going for
Yeah,
as
I
well
feel
with
like it
that scene.
definitely is trying to make that message. And that's where, like, the panda being very squishy in what it symbolizes makes the movie so hard to interpret and so uncomfortable
Yeah.
because it's not clear if
Well, I
she's.
mean, I think
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I mean, I agree with you that the panda's kind of squishy, but like it starts out as representing kind of puberty and um body changes and feeling sexual feelings and those kinds of things, and then it sort of expands to personal identity development, which can include, I guess, going to concerts, and would definitely, I think, include sexuality. So for me, that definitely that works within kind of the identity development. And I think in general, for Latter Day Saint parents, when we look at so many movies, kids movies now, that are primarily, like, the primary theme is like identity development and getting beyond your parents' expectations, like that topic is always going to be there. Like, this can work as a metaphor for LGBT, for coming out and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, but it's certainly
Right.
one interpretation. The thing that I disliked, well, okay, I like part of it, and then I disliked part of it. I really liked that they had the temple, and that it shows her there being like I'm going to use this phrase, a temple worker, and participating in the rituals and doing the things that have been passed down from her family since the original Sun Yi, and but at the end of the movie, she's still doing it, but the message has been very clearly made that, like, and you quoted this earlier, Liz, like, where she says, oh, now I'm not remembering the phrase, like, you go do your thing, don't listen to anybody, even me. What's the phrase she
Yeah, don't
uses?
hold back for anyone. The farther you go, the
Right,
prouder I'll be. So you can go as far as you want
right,
from tradition. It'll only make me happy.
right. And the heavy implication of that is that if she were to abandon doing her temple ceremony ritual,
Or shrine maiden stuff.
the things that she has sort of been passed down from generation to generation. And if you're like, hey, if you don't want to do that, that's fine, it doesn't matter, like, forget the whole tradition thing. That was the moment where I was looking at this movie going, ooh, I'm really glad my 5-year-old didn't watch this with me, because I was trying to instill that, even though it was kind of maybe being bad parent to be like, oh, you can handle the 3 blocks, you're fine. It's only 40 degrees outside. You got a coat. It's whatever. But your ancestors, right? Like trying to teach them about how the great things their ancestors did and that legacy. And I would be deeply uncomfortable with my daughter being like, or with me in the future telling my daughter, do whatever you want. Forget all of that tradition that has been passed down to you. It doesn't matter. You do your thing. Like that's a bad. I mean, there are
It
lots
almost
of good
goes against
discussions.
the way they've set up the tradition in the film, right? Because Sun Yi asks for this power to defend her family, right? She asks for the panda to serve other people. And then the panda has somehow turned into, the panda is to serve me, to be more myself. It is not something that I am doing because I want to serve other people. I don't consider other people. I consider whether it helps me, whether it is expressing
Yeah.
myself, expressive individualism.
Whether I can earn money for me and my friends to go to the concert, whether we can get money to go to the concert by being the panda, or use the panda for
And that
games.
was a moment that disappointed me a lot, is when she in the netherworld or whatever, when she finally meets Sun Yi, she doesn't say anything. Like, she's just there. Like, embracing the panda can be part of your family tradition because it comes from this ancient ancestor who used it to this really good effect. Not embracing the panda is also part of your family tradition because everybody since then has kind of wanted to get rid of it. But Sun Yi doesn't say anything, and I feel like it just reminds me of this quote from Elder Holland about gods who don't demand anything of us, who kind of pat us on our head and tell us to go pick marigolds. Like, Sun Yi is just like, hey man, because she doesn't speak anything, she then doesn't put any kind of obligation or anything for Mei Mei to respond to. And so just this combination of like the toxic perfectionism and honor your father and mother and tradition and be yourself, like there's good discussions to be had about the relationship, the balance between all of those. I just felt like this movie failed at all of them.
Yeah, Sun Yi turns out kind of like if we were to redo the C.S. Lewis quote about the grandmother god who just wants to be sure that everyone has a good time. Like that's how it is.
Yes.
Like I just want to be sure that you're feeling good about yourself, Mei Mei, and that's it.
Everybody wants a grandfather in heaven.
Yeah. I was thinking about when I was a teenager. I had a lot of conflict with my parents about tradition versus my desire to be myself, especially with religion. I came from a Jewish background, and my family really my not so much religious, but very cultural, and it was a very important part of our heritage. And I didn't understand it at all as a teenager. I just didn't get it, why it mattered. It felt so constricting. And as I've gotten older, as I've become a parent myself, I mean, now I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I get it. I understand the importance of tradition and instilling heritage and passing things down that are meaningful and important. And I get it so much more now. And so I think this movie just, it like stuck in the mindset of a 13-year-old. It doesn't show that the 13-year-old's not 100% right. She's going to learn, I think, as everyone does when they get older, that the things our parents do and teach and are important. There's value to them, that there's reason for tradition. It's not meaningless. It's not random. There is a purpose for it. And I think that I just think that the movie doesn't show the reconciliation of those things at all. It really just is stuck in the mindset of a 13-year-old.
Which is really interesting because you notice the movie takes place in 2002, which is exactly when the director, Domi Shi, was a 13-year-old girl in Toronto as a first-gen. Like, this movie is incredibly autobiographical. And that you can tell that that is a strength of the movie, I think. Mm-hmm. But that also feels a little lazy to me. I don't know. That was a very interesting fact for me to figure out.
Yeah, no,
like
writing creative
specifically
nonfiction
put
can
it
be harder
right there.
When you're writing from your real life and trying to figure out how much to make there be a meaning and make it work or change things. Yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts of the movie, was that I'm about the same age as the director, and so the whole time I was like, that's a Tamagotchi, that boy band, that was the nostalgia factor.
The Tamagotchi was great.
Was enjoyable.
Oh. Yeah, there were definitely some enjoyable moments, but overall, definitely some concerning moments as well. So, as we're
Mhm.
kind of wrapping up here, we'll do our closing segment, which is where we give the movie some ratings. For content, where would we put this? In celestial, telestial, terrestrial? I mean,
I mean, if we're grading it based on a kids movie, I would probably say terrestrial for me. It yeah. I mean, there's nothing in it that would be shocking for an adult audience, but certainly for children, it wasn't as clean as I
yeah,
would
yeah.
like it
For
to
a
be.
family movie, if you're going in with the mindset of a Pixar movie is one that I can go to with my family, I would not put it on a safe movie for a family.
Yeah. I mean, I
Mm.
I appreciated that there was a moment of discussion of that maybe this is her first period. I'm all right with sort of normalizing that more than we have in our very puritanical repressed culture talking about bodies, and especially women's bodies. But there were just so many negative messages. I was going to give this a Telestial rating. Like I don't think this has.
Yeah.
It kind of starts off well and it ends well, but if you watch the middle, you would have no idea how they ended up at such a reasonable sort of conclusion. Uh, that felt shoehorned into me
Yeah.
based on what came before. So I give it a
Mhm.
Telestial.
Yeah, I think for me, for kids, like as a family movie, I'd say Telestial. For a grown up movie, maybe Terrestrial. Just because even for a grown up, I think that the objectification, the sexual
Yeah,
objectification
it
of
was
13-year-olds is
uncomfortable.
problematic. Just the fact that it's about 13-year-olds. So that part, even for adults, I think it makes me uncomfortable with it. But overall, I think that the bigger problem was for kids. If this is directed at 7, 8-year-olds, like that is not appropriate.
Sure.
I think for that
I
age
have a
group.
question for the group actually on this point. Do we, and maybe we'll just edit this part out. Um, does it seem like everybody dressing up like pandas was like quasi furry culture? Because that's also something that knocks it down a peg on my
I
chart.
mean, definitely when she's going out to karaoke at the end, right? And she's got the tail and the ears, and the mom's like, no way. And that's where the My Panda, My Choice line comes up, right?
Oh,
Yep.
that was so bad.
Yeah.
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 So
So,
I
so
think
bad.
definitely there's a little bit of that
Mhm.
implication, which kids are not going to catch, but adults are definitely going to catch.
Yeah.
So,
Would teenagers catch? Because I
I
feel like
mean,
the
teenagers nowadays,
teenage
you don't know
girls and
what they'll
teenage
catch.
girls' moms. Well, that's fair enough. Yeah, but the target audience is teenage girls and teenage girls' moms, and so that's
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that teenagers would catch that. At least like older, like late middle school or high school teenagers would catch
Okay,
that.
how
And
about
I
the
think that's a
artistic
good point.
merit of the film? As a film, how does it do 1 to 5 popcorn balls?
I would give it a 4. I loved I thought that I think Billie Eilish and her brother did the pop music, and I
Uh,
thought that was really fun. I mean, it was clean. It was a lot cleaner than
Yeah.
most of the movie. And I thought it was a fun kind of kid version of the kind of pop music that would have been popular at that time. So I thought that was fun. It's Pixar. It's super beautiful. The colors are really fun and unique. It was a little bit different where the colors were sort of really vibrant. And I served my mission in Toronto, so I loved seeing Toronto. I thought it was just looked gorgeous. So I would give
Oh,
it a
was it
4.
accurate? Like the
Um,
skyline and stuff?
well, I mean, I wasn't paying like real close attention, and
Okay, okay.
I didn't serve in that area of Toronto, so I just, so I wouldn't
but
necessarily be
still, the
able to speak
nostalgia
to the
factor.
perfect accuracy, but there was definitely some nostalgia there.
I think they missed out on a
Yeah.
perfect opportunity to do a Kim's Convenience cameo in there. Like, I don't know why that wasn't there. I was still wanting the convenience store to be Kim's Convenience. Just saying.
Oh, that's funny.
Right, right. Yeah.
I'd give it probably a three out of five. I was debating between a 2 and a 3. I mean, I think artistically the movie is like beautiful and well shot, and I mean there's a lot of craft there. I think that the fact that the mixed message aspect of it lowers it in my mind. The fact that I just think the overall theme is just muddled, and I think that lowers to me the overall skill of the movie. It has to lower it in my mind. So I'd give it I'd say 3, but just because it's beautiful, it's Pixar, it is well done, but I think that it's just the muddled message lowers it as far as artistic merit goes.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to that. I'm gonna give it a 4 as well. Even though I disagree with a lot of what I think the thesis of the movie is, I do think that they portrayed that thesis really well. So in that sense, that it kind of did what it was going for, even if I disagree that the best way to have a positive relationship with your mother is to rebel against her until she gives in. Every teenager thinks their parents are overbearing, and some parents are, but not all of them. And not in these one-dimensional ways. So that knocks it down for me. But the movie was gorgeous, so I'm going to give it 4 popcorn balls.
Yeah, I gotta go with the 3 popcorn balls too. Just script wise, there's not a problem with the animation. It's just like the overall message of the movie is very unclear. You can kind of tell generally the target they're hitting, but it's not a bullseye. Sure. And for gospel connections, 1 to 5 apricots.
2.
I'm gonna
say 2.
This is gonna be like
I mean, I like they didn't do a good job, but I always like movies that like have good tie-ins with ancestors and heritage, and so that was there, and that gives you a topic as a parent to talk about with your kids, even if it wasn't done really well. So there's that one. There's also family responsibilities in the temple. Again, not done really well, but it's there. It's a good topic, and also regardless of how the mom was portrayed really one-dimensionally and at some points was kind of villainized, there was a good strong at the beginning and at the end, a good strong mother-daughter relationship there, and I really appreciated that, and so there were some good things at least that you can pull out of it, even if you're really making a stretch.
Yeah,
I'm gonna give it a 1. I agree with everything Amanda just said, but the negatives were not worth those positive messages, and especially because the positive messages were not handled particularly well. So this is, I think, the first time I've done this, but I'm just going to give it 1 apricot.
I'll go with a 2 as well. I think it was I think Amanda and Carl both said really well. Like what was there was some good themes, but it doesn't hit very well. I think that there's at least a room for a good conversation about some of the themes. There's enough interesting themes there that you could have some good discussions. Not for 8-year-olds or young kids, but I think for older teens or grown-ups, there might be some good conversation based on the themes of it, and so I think it deserves at least the 2, but very
Friday night right after we watched it, I would have given this a 1, but I had a discussion with my kids about it, and we actually had some pretty good discussion. So I'm gonna bump it up to a 2. Kind of the same thing you guys have said, that like there are things that you can talk about, but it's almost in spite of the movie. It's in spite of where they were trying to go with things. Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah.
So
at the end, we like to let everybody know where they can find us if they want to read or hear more from us. You can find my writing at lizbusby.com. Carl?
I'm just on Facebook, although now that I'm going to be a co-host, I might actually have to join the Twitterverse, so we'll see how that goes. But right now I'm just on Facebook. Yeah, right. Right now I'm just on Facebook at carl.cranny. You're welcome to come hang out and chat there. Always have good, fun discussions. I enjoy Facebook quite a bit, but I know it's, not for everybody. And maybe you'll see me on Twitter in our next episode.
Maybe. Daniel, where can we find your stuff?
Let's see. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Then I also blog for Nauvoo Neighbor and also on Public Square Magazine occasionally. Right now we've been I'm sorry. Right now I've been doing a series for Lent of going through President Nelson's conference talks and writing posts about those. So that's been a really fun
They've been
that's
really
on-
interesting.
on
I've been
album
enjoying
for-
them.
So I think that come check that out.
And Amanda, where can
on
people
Album
find
for-
you?
I am on Twitter at FreeBaronAmanda, and I'm on Public Square, mostly on Public Square, and a little bit at Nauvoo Neighbor. So Public Square is publicsquaremag.com, and then also on Nauvoo Neighbor.
Fantastic. This has been Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree, encouraging you to seek after everything virtuous, lovely, of good report, or praiseworthy. We'll see you next time.